Stumble forward, stumble forward. The 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 stumble.
I'd like to welcome Kathleen Edwards to the Stumble Forward. Kathleen is a 7-time Juno Award nominated, Polaris Prize nominated singer-songwriter who's released 5 critically acclaimed full-length records. She's toured extensively and even played Late Night with David Letterman 5 times. I think Kathleen is one of the best songwriters in the country and has amassed an intimidatingly strong body of work that stands as one of the greatest collected outputs of any Canadian songwriter in recent memory. Please welcome Kathleen Edwards. Hi, Kathleen.
Oh, my God. Wow. That's an intro.
Just truth bombs?
I'm so humbled by that intro. That's beyond, I have to tell you.
Yeah, but that's the truth. So it's just like, I'm just starting out with the facts, and then we work from the facts into the fun. I mean, you are enigmatic in that way. Like, I sort of see you as being so good, it's hard to believe that you're in this country or any country. Like, but did you start in music? Like, what was the start? Were you a kid who played music? Were you a piano kid, or how did it all start?
Yeah, it started violin lessons. My mom is an extraordinarily talented musician. She was and went to U of T for piano. She's a pianist, incredible. She was the kid who got asked by her church up in Kirkland Lake, Ontario, to be the organist because she was so good. Anyway, and so, my brother and I, he's 2 years older than me, but we both got into music lessons really young. And my brother took piano and took to it really quickly. And then I did not, because I was probably very stubborn. And so my mom had me switch over to violin, which she said I asked for. So I started taking classical violin lessons. Probably around the age of 5 or 6. It starts out, they like, you come home, your parents like, we got you a violin. And then they come home and it's like, it's a wooden box with a ruler sticking out of it. You're like, you can't move to the actual instrument until you've learned how to not drop the box on the floor. So yes, so that's how I started.
You traveled a bunch as a kid too, is that right? Or because your dad had a job that you moved. Is that, you were in Korea, Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
Was that formative stuff, or is that too long ago to remember, or was that a big part of who you are currently?
Oh, it became a huge part of who I am. My dad was in the Department of Foreign Affairs. My brother is now too. And so my dad and my mom had actually my dad served for the Canadian government in Vietnam during the war. Wow. That was his first posting. And then he came back, he and my mom got married. They went to Turkey, they went to Belgium. And then when I was 5, we moved to Switzerland, and my dad worked there in Geneva. And then as a teenager, I lived in Seoul, Korea for a few years. And I was the kid who, I'm very susceptible to nostalgia. I really understand what it feels like to be homesick, and that feeling of nostalgia. I always wanted to be the kid who grew up with that, like the core friend group. And it was, it did not change from the time you started school until the time you finished high school. And even then, your university or whatever you did afterwards would have been heavily influenced by your family, which would have been your friend group. And that wasn't my reality. I had some beautiful friends come in and out of my life, but you have to pick up and move. And so we did.
Is that imagined life of, like, it's funny, I just sent a text about my family not sort of being a family that does birthdays. Like, is that sort of like want to have had a version of life? I guess what I'm getting at is, when I hear your voice and I hear the character in your songs, I hear that they are married inextricably. And I feel that, like, your voice lends a deep authenticity to the lyrics. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Sometimes with a songwriter, there can be some sort of like division between the sound, the actual texture of that voice, and the lyrics that are coming out. It's like there's some sort of disconnect that makes it hard for the listener to go, while I like these lyrics, I just don't, for some reason, quite understand why this particular voice is saying these words. And I feel like with you, it's like, man, we're walking through a version of your life, as I can only assume as a fan, that is honest and true, because it feels like it comes from a deep well of authenticity. To hear you sort of say that you had a nostalgic version of life that you'd wish that had played out with the loyal friends from grade school that follow you through your life and then are your bridesmaids or whatever. Like, I've been trying to figure out what, before doing this chat with you, just about who is the character in those songs, and is it a sort of a wistful, nostalgic, wished for version of you, or what is going on? Who is that person in those songs? Because I feel like I know that person, but that's what a great songwriter does. Is it the great songwriter opens the door so that there's never any awkward acquaintance with the listener. Like you just
Yeah.
move right into that pathway of being with somebody in their trueness. So
Oof,
I know I'm
that's
sort of getting circuitous
that's
here,
some
but
complex shit.
well,
It is though, because I mean, you write songs. I think I don't know. Okay, well, I've been working on a song in the last few days, and I'm living in it. Like I can't shake it. I can't. The melody keeps playing in my head. I keep wanting to go down and play it and really know it and dig my teeth into it. And it's a very, very like, it's going into the trenches of my most insecure places, because it's about, me feeling vulnerable and invisible in this career life and the entertainment life and sort of the public thing. And am I doing the right thing? Am I even good anymore? That world. I'm sort of digging my teeth into a song that sort of lives in there and tries to be very authentic. And I'm terrified. The idea of playing this song for anyone terrifies me, because it's totally me. Like I'm putting all my cards on the table, and it could be very bad. It could be a very bad song. With the character songs that I've written, I think I'm always projecting onto the characters anyway that I'm writing about, and I'm projecting their experiences because I'm trying to make sense of them. And the only way I can make sense of that person and that character is to try and embody them. And I cannot not be me. I can't not experience my life up until now in the moment that I'm writing. So I'm sure that everything I've done is simply some projection, no matter how infinitely small it still is. I mean, that's probably true. I don't know.
Like I know when Failure came out, I mean I've told you that record was just so massive for me, and I mean massive for a lot of people. But even like the Peter Sweet Baby, Where'd You Get That Gun? Like I wanted to believe that had really happened. I love that song so much that for some reason, like I mean, it lives as a truth in me. I don't know if it is true or not. I have a feeling I may know who you were singing about, but like, is that a real song? Is this a ridiculous question to ask? Like, why do I want it to be real? Like, why do I want to invest in myself in that way that I go, if this didn't really happen, how can I trust it? But you guide us through with that authenticity that I'm sort of allowed to live in that fantasy and believe in what's really going on in it. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. I have wondered that myself, because I, for a long time, didn't listen to my records and my music, and I didn't play for, quite a few years too. And I completely lost touch with what those albums sound like. And you play that stuff, let's just say you go on tour for 10 years and you play some of the songs that are the most popular every night, you do kind of stop thinking about the root of all of them. You just play them and you sing them and you try and play them well and stuff. And the 6 o'clock news, I listened to a lot and had to write the lyrics out recently because some people bought some handwritten lyrics. And what I was so shocked about was thinking like, God, who was this person that wrote that song? Like, I was so fearless. Like, I didn't care if it was a real story or not. I just jumped in, and Peter Sweet Baby, Where'd You Get That Gun? Like, I have a hard time imagining the today person being able to write so sort of like, there it is. Like, I would maybe I would discount it, maybe I wouldn't, but I really
Hmm.
loved the person who wrote that song, the version of me that wrote that song was so willing to just jump in. And I remember writing it about a story that was on the news, just sort of, maybe just somewhere in Ottawa. There was a guy who had, barricaded himself into his home in a domestic dispute, and he had a weapon. And so they had, the police had surrounded and evacuated the surrounding homes, which is not, sadly, a very uncommon story. Um, but that was the story. I just took it and turned it into this song. And sometimes I wish I could be the same
Hmm.
writer that I was then, where I just didn't overthink anything and it just went bloop, and there it was. I'm sure you can relate to that
I
sometimes too.
relate 1,000,000%. And to be honest with you, I've been like I talked to Sarah Harmer last week, and I talked to Ron Sexsmith like the week before. And this is not, there's not a dissimilar sentiment sort of coming from those two. And I mean, I guess my perception of the industry was when I started that it was a beauty contest some way or other, and that my youth and I was trading on my youth and my face and stuff, and so there was aspects of my youth that I thought, oh heck, wouldn't it be great to carry this vigor forward. But like you've just said, it's actually what I miss more are it's some of more the risky poetic version of myself that seemed to have no limitation, in terms of what I would create for images. I mean, listening today to Total Freedom, like it did strike me that there is a matter of factness to the lyric, which I also liked, because that sort of tender ache that is kind of consistent through all of your work was still there. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
Mhm.
okay, so there's a song about sleeping dogs and birds at the feeder, which is not Peter Sweet Baby, where'd you get that gun? Like there is like an age to it. There's something more observational, but there's still that ache. And I'm not sure, again, like when I listen to your, like, the margarita and sleeping pills, like there's a way you organize your words. It's like it's like if I give you 6 words, 100 people would organize them one way, and you would organize them slightly differently in that way that, again, creates, like I said, that ache, that something that is very you and your lyrical self, that even all these years later, with more observational, matter-of-fact approach to the lyric, I still feel some of that authentic goodness that I felt from Failure and your early records too. But it's a bummer. It's a bummer. I mean, it's funny. I wrote down, because I was listening to a couple of your interviews earlier, and there's a Stoic quote that I always bring out about comparison being the thief of joy. I mean, it's the thief of joy when we're comparing our older selves to our younger selves. But I
Uh,
mean, in a ridiculously competitive industry like the music business, especially the Canadian music business, I feel like I spent the first 10 years of my career with my nose at a joint, comparing my relative success to others and wondering why somebody had more or why somebody had less, or how the currency value of how the zeitgeist values you from moment to moment to moment. Over the years, I'm sure you've felt if you can kind of smell the zeitgeist, you can tell when your stock is up, and then you can kind of tell when your stock is down. And if you last long enough, you that roller coaster ride of your stock going up and down is something that, if you choose to normalize it, can be something that you arrive at some modicum of comfort with. I mean, I look at you and go,
yeah.
why aren't you a megastar? I'm sure you feel a little bit of that. I mean, there's a lot of people in Canada that we could go, why aren't they the megastar? I mean, to me, you in some ways are without peers. Like, I don't know how to put it other than how great you are. Like, it's so obvious to me when I
Wow.
hear the record. So it's like, so you're writing a song that you feel deeply connected to right now, that is in some ways about some of the frustration or sadness or disappointment with where you are professionally or being invisible. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think it's just the seed of doubt that grows within you, even though there are so many things that you are fortified by as you get older. There are so many things that take me by surprise. Like I'm playing South by Southwest it's early March. I'm playing there in a week. And, you know, I it just kind of came up at the last minute and I was like, sure, I'll go. That sounds fun. And then I actually looked at a calendar and I played South by Southwest 23 years ago for the first time. And I think I was 23 years old. I was 22 years old. And I was kind of took my breath away because I didn't think twice about how fun it would be to go. And then it just took me by surprise how long I have been doing this. And then I thought to myself, like, oh, God, what does that say about me? And I say that with both good feelings and some questions about whether or not that must mean that I should probably hang up my fucking hockey skates. Like, and I've just been feeling a bit reflective about, as I think all artists are, it's that one of the reasons I quit music was because years ago was because I was working so hard to prove that I was a writer more than just the next Lucinda Williams. And I wanted so much to make records that were a reflection of the broad scope of music that I love, that I think inherently lives in me and influences me, and therefore I wanted to put that on records. And yet, no matter where I went, people would come up to me and say, "I just love your first record." And for a while, that I really was at odds with that. I couldn't understand why, despite how much I had grown and how much I had invested on being better and improving, my best work in the eyes of a lot of people who liked me was the thing I did when I didn't even know anyone was paying attention. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even trying. And that's wonderful too. And I needed some time to make peace with all of those things, right? It's and so there is this seed of doubt about what am I doing this for the right reasons? Is it coming from a place that satisfies me? And the ugly A word, which is ambition. If I'm an ambitious person and I'm not getting to the places I dreamed of getting and working hard to get to, at what point do I sacrifice feeling good about myself for the pursuit of something that may never actually reveal itself? So there's a lot there, but yeah.
If I was to distill that just for my own, to create a sharper image, is that basically, if you can't do it on your terms so that you can live with yourself, then should you continue doing it? Is that right? Is that what it kind of boils down to, what you are getting at?
I think it's that thing of like, have I done good work? And if I feel that I have, is that enough? Or do I need more than just my own self-satisfaction? And trying to balance that strange thing within yourself, the ego and the id of like, I do this because I can't help myself, not because I thought it would make me rich and famous. But there's also a part of doing this that makes it a lot more sustainable as you get older if you can stay in a nicer hotel and if you can have 2 or 3 people help you with your gear every day and sell your shit at the end of the night and make sure that, in the morning you have a coffee before your day. Like, there's an aspect to this life, the lifestyle aspect, that as you get older, if you have not made certain headway on a success front, which is, commercial success, popularity, whatever you want to call it, they are intertwined. And there are parts of that where you go, okay, like it's hard to do that when you're 45. And, last year I drove my own truck to the gigs towing a trailer, and I'm the one who backed up that trailer into the loading bay. Like, I'm proud of myself for doing that. I like that I can say I did it, but holy fuck, I don't think I have it in me to do it for another 5 years like that. I don't. It's exhausting, and I don't know what the answer is. And today I don't know what the answer is, but I'm still got this thing. I'm like, I still want to prove that I can do this. And I'm like, some days I go, who are you fucking trying to prove it to?
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know who, but I'm still in it. My dad, maybe I have dad issues. It's like, I'm still trying to prove it to my dad. I can do this, Dad. What do you mean? Go to university? I'll show you.
I mean, there's no question among your peers that you can do it. You know what I mean? Like, among your peers, you're the one showing us maybe we can't do it just because you do it so well. So your peers are going, holy shit, like that's a high watermark. That's what we're all shooting for. I've been on a major spiritual rebuild this last year and a half, and many of these type of questions have come up. And, one of the things I sort of keep reading repeatedly to go into the deep, like woo-woo stuff, would be that ultimately we're here to shine our lights at a very interesting and important time on the planet, where the kind of division and loathing that's happening it's a lot. And ultimately I quell some of my own career disappointments with some of this new replaced spiritual theory about the fact that the mere fact that I'm doing that, I get on stage and shine my light, quote unquote, is God's work fundamentally, and am I living my dream? I'm not sure I had a dream. I'm curious if you feel like you had a dream. I feel like this is another one of those things in the spiritual rebuild where the universe responds to an outward, it responds to you asking it for help. It responds to an outward proclamation of the dream. In Canada, the outward proclamation of the dream is a quick way to get a lot of people laughing in your face because, our sort of feigned humility here in Canada means that we got to keep our dreams and goals under wraps, and we can't in some ways out ourselves as a quote unquote ambitious person, like you've just said. But I mean, it's inevitable that we don't get to be who we are without some ambition. And I know within the context of the brand of rock and roll, we have to make this thing look effortless, like we can't let the stench of ambition ruin what people might really think of us. But I guess I circuitously come around to, did you have a dream when you were young? Is this the dream that you're living right now?
I don't think I know what I was dreaming of when I was young.
Yeah.
But your point about the sort of the things that I now see are the great gift, regardless of the circumstances of playing, and is that connection and connecting with people is truly the most rewarding part of my life. And I needed to own work at or own the coffee shop, or to have a place where I could not be a musician for a while. But the thing that rebuilt me, besides sort of doing something that was completely outside of that industry and just gave me a break from feeling vulnerable all the time and traveling all the time, was to really have this incredible reappreciation with other people's gratitude for the work that I had done and what it brought into their life. And I couldn't hear that. You do an after show and people go, I just love you, and I love you, and will you sign this thing? And I loved your show. And you're so, you're grateful in the moment, of course. But when someone tells you, your song was playing when my mother died, it's really hard to hear that and to appreciate how profoundly special that is, that something that I made was the soundtrack to a moment in somebody's life that they'll never forget. And it's not because of me. It just happened to be there. But I appreciate so much more the importance of connection and how profound a privilege that is. And so when COVID happened and I had, not made a record in many years, and I had made this record and it was ready to come out, and it took me a while to unpack what the biggest disappointment of putting out a record in 2020 was, besides the fact that nobody knew I put a record out. It was that I didn't, after working on this music and working on this thing that came from my hopefully most authentic place and my best foot forward, the greatest gift and the biggest payoff of that was the connection with people, and to see people's faces and to their reaction and their connecting with them was the thing that would refill my cup. And when it didn't happen, it really blew open the doors of realizing how incredibly important that was to this whole thing that I do. And now I just take shows and I see one person's face smile at it, and that is a lot, and that feels good, and that is enough. It really is. It's profoundly enough. So thank you for mentioning that, because I really do feel that is something that I've come into that I did not have at the beginning of my career.
Do you think you could have been open to that kind of wisdom 20 years ago? Or do you think that's just off the table when you have a sort of a young person's inner spiritual metabolism that might not be able to sort of reconcile something so simple and beautiful as that? Or do you think if somebody had said, hey, this is what you should be looking for when you're in your mid-20s, you could have seen it?
Yeah, I don't think I could have. And in part because I had to wear a lot of armor when I was in my 20s to just even get up and do that. I did, and it took many years to realize that, holy fuck, I really kept myself pretty protected, in terms of staying pretty insular in that time. And sometimes that was circumstantially allowed because I was in a band and we were in a van together, and I didn't, but yeah, it took a long time to realize that most of my 20s and a lot of my 30s, I was really in a what's that thing you say? I was like protecting my resources, I didn't cry until I was like mid 30s. I mean, I cried, but I'm making up for it. I didn't cry a lot. I was always tough. I was always being tough. And I cry a lot more now. The armor is gone.
You were born in 78, is that right?
Yeah.
So you're tail end Gen X like me. And I feel like our toughness, which is in some ways like sort of part of the brand initiative of late stage Gen Xers, like I'm not sure that where the world's going, that toughness is going to be needed, if you know what I mean. Like I feel like there's an openness to love that's starting to become a seeming almost inevitable, that because my competitiveness and my toughness was something I was very proud of for a very long time,
I'm walking to the door. Yes, we are, because my dog just came to me and he was like, Mom, I need to go out, and I think he's doing the I'm going to throw up in the house if you let me outside. So we have an urgent situation here, so I'm so sorry.
Let's help this poor creature.
Yeah, I think he's having a bit of an upchuck out there. Yeah, looks good. All right. Anyways, sorry about that.
No, I don't really even know exactly what I was saying. You know what I will say next?
Sorry. Yes, okay.
Derailed by the upchuck. So we'll talk about this protection thing, because here's, again, like watching you from my vantage point, there's been two things that appear to me to be extraordinarily courageous. walking away from the music industry when you did to build your coffee shop. And was it 10 years about that you were away from the industry?
Yeah. Yeah. Eight, 10,
okay.
just under.
And then, of course, through the pandemic, I would see you on Twitter. I don't spend as much time on Twitter. That's part of the spiritual rebuild, as I can't handle looking at that thing. But you also stood up for your beliefs outwardly in a way that would attract, people who would spar with you. And I know that for a lot of people, they don't want to know that you're a dynamic person under all that. Thanks to the internet, there's a sense that like you're supposed to think like your fans all of a sudden, or, you're not supposed to be a dynamic person with possibly thoughts that stray from the thoughts that everybody's expecting somebody like a Kathleen Edwards who has this brand, and you're supposed to think a certain way. And I found you would outwardly be critical of things that, were in some ways off brand for the artist. And, I don't feel like I fall under any easy political or social headline or, criteria heading any myself. So I see you as somebody who has this courage that it doesn't look like you care. And that's a superpower, in my opinion, because I feel like I wouldn't have had the guts to leave the industry, even if it felt like the industry was kicking me where it counted. I feel like I married my way into this and I wouldn't know what to do without it. And watching you sort of throw it away as if you didn't need it was mind-blowing to me. Mm. Now, that's my perception on the outside, because I was probably holding, a flaming bag of shit in my own career, and hoping things were going to get better or wishing for more or whatever it was. Did it feel courageous? Is that what it was? Or was it like what the checkout, what in your mind, what was happening? Because to me, it was like, holy, what a courageous move,
I think I remember pretty distinctly. Well, first of all, I had no context for what life would look like if I didn't play music. So there was confronting that reality. And it really just came down to, I remember very distinctly, I was dealing with clinical depression. I had just hosted the Polaris Awards. It was 2013. And I had decided I was moving back to Ottawa a few months previously, and I ended up buying a little house in Stittsville, Ontario. And I was moving into my house, getting my house the week after Polaris. And I got into my home. I'd sort of had probably very few things on my calendar. And I remember I just started writing, pick up the guitar, because that's what you're supposed to do. You finish an album cycle and you kind of take some time to rest and recover and land where you're going to land. And then you go back and you start working on a new record. And so I picked up the guitar, and every time I picked up the guitar, I was back in this very unhappy place that was reminiscent of the few years leading up to that, which was that I had been in a relationship that brought me a lot of pain. I felt very poorly about myself, and anything that I was writing about was consistent with those feelings that I was just really dying to move on from. I really wanted to get over that. And so I thought, well, how can I get over this if I'm just going to continue to this is what happens when I pick up a guitar. I'm stuck in this place. And I just thought to myself, well, surely the best thing for me then is to not do this and to find something else to do so that I can move away and get over some of the stuff that was really difficult in that time. And so I did. It wasn't like I guess I just thought, well, if you're not going to do this, you're going to have to find some. Okay, no, the dog. No, go lie down. What? What are you doing? Why can't I be part of this? Go lie down. It's enough. And I guess part of coffee shop life had been a permanent fixture in my touring life, and it was my first job, and I lived in a little town that had no coffee shop. When I lived in Toronto, I lived down the street from Rooster Coffee on Broadview, and the woman who owned it had left the film business and just opened a cafe. And she felt like a really big ally of mine, and it just fell into place it seemed logical to me. So I did that. And I didn't think it was brave. I thought it was, most people thought it was a pretty stupid thing to do. I don't really mean that. No one told me I was being stupid, but it meant also walking away. I think the reason I didn't do it sooner was because you have a team of people who are incredibly invested in you and your well-being and your career, and they have made sacrifices as well to help you get where you're going. And you feel like you're betraying them by going, I don't know if I want to do this. And I had basically a falling out with my longtime manager just before that. We couldn't work together anymore. And so I think the feeling of being indebted to him was no longer on my plate. And so I think maybe I had a bit more permission to do it. I think that's my best guess.
And so what was the spark to come back then? Like, was this something that you felt, oh, it was a few years in the making, or one day you woke up and it was like, I got to turn the lights off on this thing again and go back to the other thing? Like, so then building yourself back into the music stuff, what did that look like then?
It was a trip to Nashville. I had been asked to go and write with a woman named Maren Morris. And I didn't really know her. I knew her anecdotally because I knew she'd had a big had a big song on radio. And I think about 3 years into my coffee shop and called Quitters. And, and I remember, running that business was tough, man. It's tough. It's tough owning a small business. We were open 7 days a week. We went from, one part-time employee and myself and my friend Rick, who came to open the coffee shop with me. And we went from that to, like, in 4 years, we had 25 employees, and it was huge. It was going crazy. And I remember being in the kitchen making breakfast sandwiches, thinking like, I'd really like to just go and do something that's away from here, because I didn't have any time away from there. It was 24/7. So I was flattered. She was willing to take care of all my expenses to come down. And then when I got there, we went to a friend of hers named Ian Fitchuk. We went to his home, his little work studio. And I just immediately didn't feel like a fish out of water. It was such an easy, natural experience. And I loved creating a song. And I wasn't a big co-writer previously. I still am not really. But it's like, that there's some shit in that closet. Did I leave that closet with folded clothes, or is it full of fucking dirty laundry? I can't remember. And I opened the door and it was like, wow, actually everything's in pretty good shape over here. And I came home from those few days away and thought, man, okay, I'd love to take a stab at doing some writing again. And I just felt like that creative high, that high when you've written something and it just gives you this sense of, I just felt like, oh yeah, there I am. There you are.
Yeah.
There you are. So I started trying to remove myself day to day from the coffee shop more and more so that I could write. And I did so with mixed results, and then made a record, found a new manager, made a record over 2018 and 2019. And then, yeah, so it was good. And it was really, the break had really made me not worry so much about whether or not, I didn't put it in context. I didn't compare it to everything that I had done. I wasn't comparing it to what was coming out at the time. I felt like I was like I'd sort of lived on I was like, Tom, what's his name? Tom Hanks and his little ball Wilson. And like, we'd sort of just formed a bond, and I didn't know what was going to be out there and how it was going to go, but I felt pretty good about what I had done.
That's pretty interesting. I was going to jump in and finish a sentence for you earlier about the writing creating a sense of self-value, but then I was like, or maybe that's just for me, and that's uh, I feel like that value I get from when I've written something, especially if it's something I love, like you'd think it would be enough to ride on for like a week, but it's usually about 36 hours, and then you're back to like that zero spot again. At least that's where I sit. Do
Well,
you
look,
have that relationship?
I'm writing a new record right now. I have been for a year. The first two songs I wrote for it, I thought this is the best work I've ever done. And then, 6, 8 months later, once the rush of actually having created something that you use to find a voice to tell a story of something that's inside you that you need to sort of process, it settles and you go, oh yeah, I have that song. That song's okay. I don't know if it's going to be great, but I have it. I wonder how that's going to end up on the record or if it's going to. Um, I I run the gamut of thinking, oh my God, my work is so middle of the road, average pap. Like I never picked a lane to, I sound like me. What the fuck you want me to do? Not like sound like a heavy metal band? No, obviously I'm not going to sound like that. Am I going to sound like, you know, Beth Orton? No, Beth Orton sounds like Beth Orton. What can I, you try and you dance in doubt and you dance in, am I making the right choices? Are these good songs? I don't know. Like, I don't think that's unique to me. Like, you just kind of gotta. I have this new song that it could be terrible, but I'm living in it. And the opening line is, everyone's a critic. They can fucking suck it. I got out of bed today and I did something with it. And like, I'm trying to hold on to that right now because I applaud everyone and anyone who, no matter where they are in life, is willing to be open to the possibility of finding purpose. And you can't find that if you don't, fail sometimes at things. Like nothing is fucking flawless. Nothing's going to be perfect. And all it's so true that all the failures and disappointments and all the things that are hard in the moment to make sense of, with maybe the exception of losing somebody, all of those things have value. They add to the quality of your life and they add to the value of your moment and your purpose, where you're going. I think that's how I feel. So I got out of bed today and I did something with it. So there you go. That's all I got.
Yeah, I love that. When I was first married, I love buying paintings, and my mom's a visual artist, so um, you know, my Jennifer would ask, so what, like, we would walk through galleries if we were on tour or something, and she, because it's hard to like art sometimes because it feels like you're supposed to know something about art in order to like it. It's like there's some sort of like barrier to entry. But I don't. Obviously, I'm a working class kind of kid, and I don't really believe in that barrier to entry stuff. I, like you say, like the first thing to acknowledge is that somebody decided to do this. They painted this thing, like, which is insane. That in and of itself is insane, because think of the stuff that you should have done that day, and they went and they put paint on this huge thing. Like, it's an absurdity. That in and of itself is an absurdity. It's difficult to comprehend because it was so non-normal that in and of itself merited just stopping and pausing at the very idea that you would get up and do something with it. Like you said, to the critics, go suck it. The critics thing is crazy. I played a show in Toronto just before Christmas, and it was my most least stress gig in Toronto than I can ever remember, because I knew there was no critics there. I know there's no such thing as critics anymore. And as much as I feel like they were required, and they possibly are required in the industry because it creates discussion around the art that's being made, what I don't miss is like some cornball at Now Magazine taking pot shots at me just because I look like I'm trying hard, at my gig and wanting to do well. And I was pretty glad to know that those people weren't out there to skewer me for one way or the other. I was just permitted to be me, because I feel like like you, I have an earnestness I can't hide, and it's not cool. I'm not a cool person. Like, I'm fundamentally wired to be earnest, and earnestness and cool, you get to be one or the other. Unfortunately, I'm just earnest. So like, and so when I get judged by cool people, it's like, man, that guy looks pretty corny, because earnestness looks corny. So in some ways, I'm really glad that I'm not being judged in the same amount. Okay, so to just wind back a little bit here, in the 10 years or 8 years you were gone, like, the industry, it changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like you came back with a record, Sarah Harmer came back with a record, Joel Plaskett came back with a record. There was a lot of people that were sort of bringing these big records to the table that were meant to turn the lights back on in the career, like, this was going to be my re-entry, your re-entry. And then I felt so devastated for that whole COVID thing, because, as you already said, like, it was like screaming into a void, releasing a record at that time. Should you have sat on that music? Could you have sat on that music and waited the COVID thing out? And, like, could you sit on music, or once it's done, you got to get it out?
I mean, I participated in the decision to, and I advocated for the decision for it to come out. But who wouldn't? You record a song and you want it to come out the next day. You want to put it out. And no, I don't think sitting on it would have made any difference. I know I had this conversation with an American woman named Lauren Morrow. She waited to put a record out until 2022, and she still was like, oh my God, is this what I waited for? Like, it was like, I could not, I couldn't get it. I just could not get the momentum going. Like, I was told that this was going to happen, and none of those things happened. I really believe that, I just really believe that people's habits changed. And I think particularly in the entertainment business, or in the music business, if you are in some way were participating in it in 2019, whatever you were doing looks so much different today. And we lost a lot of people in the industry. A lot of people found other work, like managers, agents, people that worked for them, promoters, so many parts that are sort of the invisible administrative functioning of our industry. Writers, so many people had to find other lines of work. I mean, who could blame them? And what it did was it created this incredible backlog. It was like the fucking Holland Tunnel of, like, people who had a plan to put out a record in 6 months, and they'd go to some radio stations, they'd do some press, they'd shoot some visual content to promote their album. All of those things just, like, backed up. And then when I was going out in 22, you couldn't you couldn't find a rental car. You couldn't, like, there were just so many things that you could not have anticipated being part of the obstacle to actually trying to get back on that horse. And I'm just, I would call myself like the middle class worker of the music industry. I can't imagine how fucking demoralizing, frustrating, punitive, how, like, you would have questioned your existence if you were somebody who was just doing it for the first time, who was just trying to get started. I mean, the amount of people who didn't call me back, like, that just happens, but it probably felt really compounded during that time. So I don't know. And fuck, things change. Like, I was just saying, like, I played South by Southwest 23 years ago. I played in front of Rounder Records, who ended up signing me. And in our contract, there was not even a digital music clause. Like, just think about that for a second. Digital music was not even on the radar of my record company. And that's only 22 years ago. Like, the amount of things that we have done, I think musicians actually deserve to be some of the most incredibly, what's the word, when you can adjust and adaptable. We're the most adaptable professionals in the entire world. We've had to, every 2-3 years, the game has changed.
Yeah.
So I applaud us. I think like good for us for even, for making records still and even just trying because, we're not, my friend Jim Bryson used to always say, well, it's not coal mining. And I was like, meh, you know, there's, yes, his point was that it's not a hard labor job where you go into the depths of the earth and come out dirty, but your soul can. And and we do work really fucking hard, and we do actually put good into the world. Like I think everyone has an intention to do something beautiful and meaningful that they can give to connection. And I think that that is a very valuable and important part of humanity.
You must have lots of young songwriter people who are, you're a hero for them. And again, part of my sort of spiritual rebuild these last years are this sort of like impotent look back and want to have had some wise figure come in, and every once in a while they'd put their hand on my shoulder and give me the wise thing. And in fact, my wife started to just get burned out by me saying, why didn't I have that wise so-and-so? Like surely people have that wise so-and-so in their life. And so in some ways I made this like pact with myself that I would tell any artist I was working with or any artist that asked, I would tell them the exact truth as I saw it. I started to do that, and then I felt that, man, it's awfully destructive, and I'm not sure that it's necessary. So, are you in that position where people are asking you for advice, and are you giving advice?
That's so funny that you asked that. It's happened a few times where young women, specifically, for some reason, I feel very protective of any young woman who comes up to me and tells me that they're a young songwriter or just starting out. And I actually probably should not do this because I'm no wiser than anyone else. But I do actually give unsolicited advice. I'm such an asshole. I'm such an asshole. But my advice is usually this. If you really love this and it's okay to change your mind, and it doesn't take away that you will have done this for a period of time. Don't feel like anyone gets to tell you when you can or cannot stop doing it. And also, this is the long game. You are working towards the long game. So whatever setbacks you think you have today or tomorrow or next week that come your way, just remember that this is the long game, and doing this is a lifetime of ups and downs. And at some point, you will be so blown away that you are one of the people that can say, I have 4 albums. I have 5 albums. I remember when I worked with Bon Iver, it was one of the things he said to me was like, do you realize you have 4 albums? And he was like, I only have 2. I can't even imagine what it's like to have made music long enough and to have that body of work. And I was like, I'd never thought about that before. But it was true. We forget that every step and every song and every track we put down is part of the foundation of a big picture that we lose sight of because everything's momentary, it's so fleeting, and everything is now, and 5 minutes later someone's forgotten. But I try really hard not to lose faith in that. And what you said of like, why couldn't I have had that wisdom, or why couldn't somebody have just come to me when I was so depressed and so searching for answers of the meaning of what I was doing or how to keep going. And I had this fantasy of like, maybe I could just call Joni Mitchell. Maybe somebody who knows Joni Mitchell would consider telling her that she could give me 20 minutes of her time and just bestowing some of her life's wisdom on me. And now I think back, or now I look back, now I think I'm really glad that I didn't talk to Joni Mitchell, because A, who fucking knows what she would have said? Like,
Yeah.
what a terrible expectation to have put on her that she would somehow just solve all my problems. And B, all of my problems did get, I found solutions. I went seeking solutions and meaning and answers, and only I could do that. Joni couldn't do that for me. Only I could do that. So no matter what phone conversation could or could not have happened with her or anyone else, nobody was going to fix me but me. And I'm really glad that if there's any part of the difficult years that I went through when I was really not well, I'm so glad I had them, because the gift is that I can hopefully bestow just a little bit of that, not just to myself, but to younger people, so that maybe they're a bit better prepared for, like, this shit's hard sometimes and you will not feel good about yourself. But you know what? If you call someone and you fucking talk about it, you'll finish the conversation and be like, all right, I'm ready to get back on that fucking horse. Bring it to me.
That's all beautiful stuff.
Is it? Sorry, I did answer. I go on and on. I'm so sorry.
No,
You're so concise and professional, and I'm like, well, are we there? Hi.
It's
My
a
dog's
podcast,
puking.
for God's sake, Kathleen. The
Okay.
whole idea is I
Okay.
want to hear you ruminate aloud, and which will bring me maybe to my last thought. I was listening
So I
to
did
some
go
interview
on.
you
So
did,
I did go
and you were
on a bit
talking
too long.
about what's that?
I said, so I did go on a bit too long. You're like, this is my last question. It's over.
No, that's not it. I'm looking at the time. We're almost an hour. I'm trying to be. I want to make sure that you get your day there and to do whatever you're doing. No, one of the interviews I was listening to of yours, you did out a little bit of your songwriting process, and I know it's kind of a whatever songwriting process, boring, but you said something that kind of tickled me, which was that you sing your lyrics out loud as you write them. I guess these days I'm not writing anything down. I'm writing in a set of headphones on, and I'm literally like singing each lyric as they come to me when I'm in the studio, kind of writing using the studio as a writing tool. And I gathered you were writing, and it sounded like you had a similar-ish process where, like, you're vocalizing the word possibly as opposed to writing it down. Is that right? Or was I crazy? Or was that what I heard?
Yeah, a lot of my writing, I am singing to the sound of either a piano or a guitar, and I am singing a melody as the words are revealing themselves. Like, I really have to have a melody. It's almost like I'm doing improv. Like, honestly, so much of my writing was just sitting there and just trying to shoot from the hip. And then I'm like, oh, that's funny. And I write it down, or, ooh, that's good. And I write it down. And it's really just, you know, I couldn't write if somebody was if my husband or my parents were visiting here, and I could not sit around and just try ideas. Like, it's very improv style, and I would be embarrassed if anyone heard it. But then once I like what I write it down after I've said it, and I'm like, ooh.
I mean, it makes sense to me. When I hear your lyrics and your voice, that's what I maybe, going back to what I'd said at the beginning about how authentic you sell through the character, because to me you've skipped a couple of steps in the process, which means, like, we've got, like, unpasteurized milk. You know what I mean? Like, your lyric is unpasteurized because it didn't have to go through any of these other sort of intellectual processes. It's just like, it's out and in the world. It's being married to the sound in the moment. To me, again, that's how I tend to write. And I feel like I tend to be attracted to songwriters whose emphasis on the sound and texture of the word, it's almost like interstitial function before it even has a meaning attached to it, is, does this word feel right? Does
yes.
this does this vowel shape feel right in this moment?
Yes.
And then you work back from the shape of that vowel to find the word. Am I crazy?
Oh yeah, no, that's it. Like I cannot imagine how Elton John worked for all those years where he was just handed a sheet of lyrics and tried to make something musical of it. I could not wrap my head around that.
I think about that all the time.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
I think about that very thing because my dad was fanatical for Elton John. And so when I hear, and I love Elton John too. And then when I hear his lyrical stuff, and there's stuff that I like, some Elton John lyrics, which I know are Bernie Taupin lyrics, I've never been able to figure out how he's able to close the gap between. I believe I'm listening to Elton John's thoughts when I hear his music, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, they would be some crazy motherfucking thoughts if they were.
There would be a lot of crazy and a lot of like, yeah, I mean, someone saved my life tonight, Sugar Bear. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
It's extraordinary, yeah.
Well, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I'm glad that we're on side for this vowel shape, this sort of textural singing thing. It's
but
important.
I will say, Huxley, like, I wish I was a more versatile writer. I am not practiced. Like, I think anyone who can find a way to get ideas down and try things, like whatever works for you, oh my God, I applaud you, because I do sometimes feel like I'm stuck in a writing style or a form of writing that doesn't always get me where I want to be. Like I'm like, wow, I don't really know how to write ballads. There's so many people who write beautiful songs that feel and sort of land in a certain way, and they're like they have so few lyrics in them, and I'm so jealous of that. I'm like, oh, why can't I write less? Like, how did they do that? And how did they sing a song and tell a story without actually, getting too complicated? Like I really like my writing. I feel really lucky that I've been able to find a way that works for me, and I hope that it changes a million times. But I really applaud other people who have styles of writing that are not like mine, because I have a very hard time knowing how they did that. And it's so impressive to me that they do.
Do you want to know how they do it? Like, are you interested in that? If you could see, if they showed you their work and you didn't just see the answer to the question, and you got to see the full long division, like, are you interested in the mechanics of it?
Maybe.
Or are you just happy to have a relationship that's with some distance from that?
Well, I don't want to I'm happy to not try and sound like other people. Like, I mean, you fantasize like, oh, I could do that. But then you really, you are who you are. You can't change the way that your voice sounds when you sing into a microphone. And yes, you could put a million different effects on it. Maybe I will do that at some point, but we are who we are. And I think that's why you just can't compare Elton John to James Taylor, like they're just their own unique style of writers, and that's it. And we're better for it. But to answer that question in another way, I recently got asked to submit a song for a movie, and it was like on spec. So they're like, the scene is this, we want these lyrics in this song, and we want it to feel like this artist who we can't afford to sync, but this is how we want it to feel. And all that stuff's very subjective, because for you the color orange might look not the same as the color orange to me. And I loved the exercise because I ended up writing a song that I fucking loved. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't have to put any of my own emotional energy into it, but I really enjoyed writing that song and telling a story about somebody else for someone else's project. I loved it so much. And then the best part about it was that they didn't like it and didn't use it, so I get to keep it for my new record.
Nice.
How to fail, not fail, and also fail at the same time. TM. My lessons in songwriting didn't work out.
Well, I mean, heck, I feel like I've been asked to chase those things before. It's really hard to like to know how to bowl down the center of the lane and get a strike on those things. Like those, we wanted to, yeah, those film people chasing their dreams. It's very odd. But I'm glad that you were able to like, moonlight in another sort of creative modality and feel strong in it and like be actually thrilled by the detachment and then come up with something that's incredible. I mean, I feel like a lot of when we get older like this, a lot of the artistic process is tricking ourselves out of convention, tricking ourselves into self-belief. It's a lot of like, oh, if all I do
Ooh,
is just
that's
sort of,
really good. Tricking ourselves into self-belief. Whoo! That's some good shit right there. That's good. I like that.
but I mean, because the more you know, the more you know. All the beauty, like that innocence. And I always used to say in the early days, especially when I produced so many people's first records, and it's a wonder because naivete masquerades as courage, and the audience hears naivete and perceives it as courage. But it's really, as we've already mentioned earlier in this interview or in
Oh
this
my
chat,
God.
that like
Didn't you produce Sarah Sleen's, is it Night Songs?
night bugs.
Night Bugs. Whoo! Shit, that is such a good record. You did produce so many people's records that are fucking brilliant fucking records. It's so true. Like, oh, anyway, back to me.
Well, I, I was more just saying that like it's just naivete sounds like courage. And when you run out of naivete, you got to trick the audience into that perception of courage again. I think maybe the latter half of that concept is untried, but definitely the first half,
Yeah,
the naivete masquerading as courage. To me, that's scientific. That's a natural law. I don't see
yeah.
how you I
Oh,
don't see how
it's
you get
so
past
true.
that.
Listen, it's so true. I 100% agree. Yeah. Which I think is why, to maybe make a full circle moment of this podcast, to reflect on why I've been so feeling so reflective of going back to South by Southwest this next week after being there 23 years ago. And that's the perfect summation of where I was trying to be like, why was I so carefree? Why did I not worry what anyone thought of me? And why did you know, I didn't care about the clothes I wore and I didn't put any effort into did my hair look okay? Like none of those things ever fucking mattered. And it was this wonderful naivete that really did come across as courage and care. You know, I just couldn't give a fuck. But really, the whole time I was wearing armor and hoping like, please like me, please like me, please like me. I mean, we all do. I mean, we don't want people to hate us. I think that's normal. But I love that sentiment because that really actually helped me just maybe understand something that I've been trying to figure out in the last couple of days. So thank you.
Jeeps, it's my pleasure. Well, listen, Kathleen, it's really been a pleasure. And I was nervous to chat with you only because I wanted to do well by you and represent the chat in a way that would be reflective of my respect for you and your work, and that we really are big fans in this household of Kathleen Edwards. So, I mean, there's lots we could chat about, but I think leaving it there and maybe some other day we'll chat again. But yeah, I'm grateful that you're out there and that if you're having those struggles with, is this middle of the road or am I worth it? Like, I don't know. I feel like I said earlier, your peer group sees you as a leader, in my opinion. Your peer group sees you as the high watermark. And I hope you know that. And that's just the truth. Not that makes your job or anybody's job any better. It's just sometimes it's interesting. I also feel like all these years, the egos are being blunted of all the people, all our cohort, and people are saying things to me, and I find I'm saying things to people within my cohort that I couldn't have said 10 years ago or 20 years ago because I would have been too up in my own ego. But in many ways now, understanding who's survived this thing and who's still doing it and who's doing it with a want and a desire to do it at an extremely high level. All of a sudden, this is just a newer, older, much more improved version of me, but I respect the hustle on that stuff, and I respect the desires and want to keep walking into the punch in the chin, and despite that punch in the chin, making beauty every time. And you do that. So it's great. And thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a profoundly meaningful sentiment about keeping going. And it probably would be true about anything that anyone has pursued in life. And music is the thing that you and I have, and it does, I do not take it for granted. And I also, the days where I feel like, holy fuck, do I even have anything good to offer in this pursuit? I think the thing that keeps me going is what you just said about having not survived, because I was never, under threat, but the fact that I've decided to keep going. It's like someone asked me a couple of months ago, like, what's the secret to staying in the music business? I was like, don't die and keep showing up. Like, that's all I got, because there are a lot of people who do terrible music as far as my tastes go, which is only because that's what my tastes are, that are hugely popular. And, they just kept showing up. And that also takes a great amount of commitment and bravery. And I applaud anyone who has stuck through it, no matter what their work sounds like. Good on you. Good on you.
Amen.
I do have another question for you. Can I ask you one question, even though this is your podcast?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I would love to know what has been one of the most challenging sort of maybe what has been one of the things that's sort of been a bit of a barrier or a wall in sort of this pursuit of, a more deeper pursuit in your spiritual search? What has been a thing that surprised you as sort of being really difficult or uncomfortable in that exercise?
I think the spiritual life is a life of paradox, and I think it's not succinct. And I think the spiritual life is purposely, the seeds have been sown purposely over vast stretches of space. And I don't think that one answer is contained in a monopolized like religion or in any one locale. I think that the spiritual person is a person who searches, and that search never ends because the pieces are not all in one place. And you'll get pieces whose fundamental essence are contradictory, and then the paradox starts to happen. And the paradox is frustrating and makes you want to quit the journey. And so you have to get comfortable with paradox. You have to get comfortable in that Socratic not knowing. And I want to know stuff. Like I like, even talking to you and wanting to get into the mechanics of the songwriting. Like I'm interested in how things happen. I'm interested in my spiritual life as it has amounted through actions, I fell apart about a year and a half ago, and I could feel myself cycling through belief systems for the next several months. I've had an astrologer in my life since I was a teenager, the same person. She's been elemental for me. And so I'm not getting anywhere. I don't think I'm not answering the question, but I guess, yeah, I did. The paradox is the big surprise for me. At least that's what my journey. Why? Do you have feelings around this stuff?
No, I was interested to know, because usually something, something really uncomfortable is happening within ourselves that makes us go like, I need to find an answer to why this is so uncomfortable,
Mm.
why maybe it's don't have answers, whatever it is. One of the things that I heard at a funeral not that long ago that really struck a nerve with me about how I want to live the rest of my life was about the pursuit of curiosity, the importance of curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that I like songwriting and storytelling so much is because I'm so curious about people's stories. And the older I get, I think probably the more judgmental I get, but also the less judgmental I get. And the paradox in those two things, and how, how we find a way to continue to be curious when at the same time, as we get older, we kind of like things to be safer, more the same. And balancing those two are an interesting thing to try and correlate.
Mm.
I know.
No, that's very heavy.
But yeah, always stay curious. I hope that is something that I can always keep close to my, sort of the intention, and whether that's about myself or about not being fearful of things that I don't understand and actually being curious about them instead. What a much better way to live life.
I agree. In fact, as I've gotten older, there's been a couple, there's two kind of human brands that are like new to me. One is the person who's a social masochist. This is a new social brand to me, which is the person who likes to be hated. And I've met a couple of those people in the music industry, and they put themselves out in such an assholic way that they're hated. And
are they
what's
managers?
That?
Are they music managers?
I mean, I don't want to get too close to the bone on this, but you and I would probably, we could probably write down some vocations and we'd be awfully close. So that was one of those things as I got older. It's like, oh, there's a new brand of human I never perceived when I was younger. And that's the social masochist, the person who is an asshole, and that's their brand. And they self-define by being hated by everybody else in the room. The other one and to my surprise, was when I meet people who are not curious, I don't know if it's a function of narcissism or what it is, but I'm spooked by people who don't want to know stuff, who are not fundamentally interested in the experience of being alive, all aspects of it,
Yeah.
Because it's such a wonderful mystery. And of course, the beauty is in the mystery. And then maybe there's some sort of the simplicity of not wanting to know. Maybe there's something absolutely spiritually succinct about somebody. Once you've gotten rid of curiosity, then you can just have this sort of this bliss of not caring how things work or how people feel or how humans interact or all that stuff that makes being a curious person such an exquisite reason to be alive, I don't know, maybe there's something spiritually succinct about not being curious. But when I'm around somebody who's not curious, I'm very disconcerted. It's very disconcerting.
Yeah.
It's a real missing piece.
Yeah. So interesting. The other thing I heard recently that I mentioned, or I said in context of songwriting, but it really was like, oh my God. And I knew it sort of theoretically to be true, but then when I'd heard it in sort of the way that it was presented, I was like, oh my God, I'm not self-aware enough, was that everything we do and say and everything that we analyze, we do so with, we're projecting our own voice into that. And that's really given me, actually brought a lot of peace to me, because I've wondered, I have felt one of the things that has frustrated me a lot was sometimes the way people handled information in the last few years. And when I say the last few years, I mean generally, obviously, specifically in the context of the pandemic. And it's brought me a lot of peace to consider that people are always projecting their own thoughts and feelings and subconscious experiences, all that stuff, in the way that they can even absorb information, let alone have opinions or how they perceive it, something, because they can't, no one can really help that. And I do, and I do the same thing. And it doesn't make it us bad people. Not that I think there are bad people out there. I just mean that it's a really nice thing to keep close to my thoughts when I'm struggling with somebody's perception of something that I see very differently. And that has helped me immensely. And I think that will probably be a tool that I will use for the rest of my life, and probably bring me come to acceptance a lot more easily, and still be curious.
Yeah. This piece, I'm curious how this piece fits into the giving advice section of the show. 'Cause like, all of a sudden the projection and the advice giving, and maybe this is why after giving some pretty sturdy advice that sounded ultimately destructive when I finished giving it, I wondered how much of that projection you're talking about, how much of my own wish to go back and remake my steps is part of my emphatic advice giving. This is why it's hard to trust advice. Even sometimes when I'm looking for advice, I know that there's some people I can't call because I'm going to get their projection, not true advice,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, fuck. Now I'm starting to wonder if we should just re-record this podcast, because I projected all fucking over it.
I know. What a waste. What a waste of an hour 23. Seriously. Okay, Kathleen Edwards, I'm letting you go.
That's great. That's so great. All right. I feel like we covered. We did great today.
Yes, we did great. You were very kind to go through all of our power outages and other technological problems. Thank you so much for sticking it out. Thank you very much for being you, and I'm very grateful for this chat. Very, very. And bless you, and take care in all your pursuits going forward.
Well,
enjoy Florida.
I send you all the same things, and thank you for being so kind and generous with your compliments and building and pumping me up. Thank you. That was really beautiful, and it meant a lot to me that you said those things, and you wouldn't have had to say those things, and I would have been still thrilled to hang out and talk.
Well, I'm a huge fan, Kathleen. Listen, please take care of yourself. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
The Stumble Forward is an Isadora Media production and is hosted by Hawksley Workman and produced by Jennifer Kavanaugh. Be sure to subscribe and follow The Stumble Forward. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Hawksley Workman. Thank you for listening.
Stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward. Do forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble.